Are there times when you should stay in the relationship? Um, Absolutely not. I do not believe that any woman should ever stay with a man who has risked their life, risked their health, and in every way betrayed all of the agreements that were foundational to the relationship to begin with. Yesterday, I posted a video that I very much regret, and this is a rare occurrence for me. I have posted thousands of videos in the years that I've been on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and there's only a handful that I would say I wish I hadn't posted. And this one bothers me so much that I've considered taking it down, but rarely do I ever take a video down. Hi there, I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two, where I share my escape from Mormon tradwife life and how I've rebuilt on the other side. And I'm also kind of regretting that I can see the vacuum behind me over here, but it would be weird if it just disappears in the next frame, right? What vacuum? I didn't see a vacuum. Anyway, yesterday I posted a video about should you stay or should you go? My 4 rules of thumb for deciding if you should stay in a long-term committed relationship after finding out that your partner has cheated on you. What I thought were some really good tips, things like assessing whether it's a good relationship or a bad relationship to begin with, realizing that you're probably never going to forgive and forget, and that he will likely cheat again. And I felt like I gave women who had discovered adultery something to think about, but in the end, that video in no way reflects what I actually think about the circumstance. So I'm going to dive into that today in a part 2. Ignore everything that I said in that first video. I'm going to decide if I leave it up or not. I think that in some circumstances, it could be genuinely solid advice. And I do have to give a couple of warnings and disclaimers on this video that I'm going to dive into all kinds of different areas that some people may not want to go with me. First of all, TMI into every personal crevice of my life because it's necessary for the topic of conversation. Number 2, lots of adult conversations. So if you're listening to this while you carpool the teenagers to high school, I would put this on pause and come back to it. We'll also be discussing domestic violence. So if you have any triggers or negative emotional responses around that, protect your mental health first and foremost, and this may not be the video for you. So that being said, let's dive into what I really think you should do if you discover that your long-term committed partner has committed adultery. To get where I want to go, first I have to share you my TMI story. So we are going to be besties for a minute, and I want you to keep in mind who I was at the time of this story. I was a 40-year-old, very sheltered Mormon stay-at-home mom. I had been married at this point for 22 years. I lived in Utah. I never even watched R-rated movies. I never had any alcohol. I had only been exposed to pornography a couple of times in my life by my husband. And I really spent most of my time with other faithful LDS stay-at-home moms and some of our friends and family. My family of origin was extremely devout too. So I was raised in a purity culture without almost any sexual experience. So I was completely unprepared for what dropped into the middle of my life. One Christmas, not that many years ago, I had a yeast infection. It was super annoying. I remember trying to do the Christmas shopping and getting a package off to my missionary son. And just, if you've had a yeast infection, just how itchy and awful it gets. I'd had yeast infections before. Wearing Mormon garments gave me yeast infections from time to time. And just being a woman, it happens now and then. But this was unlike other yeast infections that I had had. Here comes the TMI. It was much more burny and much more just drippy than anything I'd ever experienced before. And I called my doctor and told him I had a yeast infection. It was Christmas vacation. I couldn't come in and get swabbed or anything. And they usually didn't do that anyway for yeast infections. It was typically just an over-the-phone type of thing. He prescribed the diflucan and I went and picked it up and took the whole entire round, and it actually got worse. It didn't get better. I threw everything at this yeast infection. I was taking baths with my doTERRA Melaleuca oil and using coconut oil tampons with more Melaleuca and some other essential oils in it targeted to get rid of infections. And it got worse and worse and worse. And then I started to have generalized pelvic pain. And then I just started to feel sick all the time. And I finally went into my doctor and told him this is still going on and I can't get rid of it. And he ran some other labs and said, your white counts are absolutely through the roof. I don't know what's going on, Jenny, but this doesn't seem like a yeast infection. My doctor asked me at that time if I could possibly have been exposed to any STDs. And I told him, no, absolutely not. I've never been with anybody but my husband. We got married when I was really young. And unless you can get it from a swimming pool or trying on bikinis in the Nordstrom Rack dressing room, there's no way that I could possibly have STDs. And my doctor said, well, perhaps your husband could have brought something home to you. And I was actually angry with my doctor for thinking such horrible things about my husband. It's crazy to me, the timing of this doctor's appointment, because it was just a couple days before I would find out that my Mormon returned missionary husband of 22 years had had a double life. And I do need to dive into some specifics of his double life on this video that I don't often do in other videos. He had been cheating on me for years, mostly with girls, where he drove down to State Street in Salt Lake City, drove around the blocks looking for sex workers that are actually out there on the streets and picking them up and engaging with them. When I found out about his double life, one of the very first questions that I asked was, please tell me that you used protection. You did use protection, correct? My husband told me that he had never used protection. He said, why would I pay for something that I can't feel the entire sensation? I've never been somebody who likes to use a condom. So no, I never used protection. So my husband had dozens and dozens of encounters, as many as 100, could be even more than that, with most of the sex workers off the street that were having multiple partners a day. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I actually had some phone conversations with a couple of these girls as I took their contact information off of his phone. And I did ask one of them, how many guys will you usually do in a day? And she said between 5 and 10. For most of the time that my husband was doing this to me, I was fighting for my life from a hospital-acquired superbacteria called C. diff, which is what would lead to my near-death experience from sepsis in 2013. And I was critically ill in bed or in the hospital for most of 3 years. And I had endured extreme pain and suffering and so many different medical procedures to try to be here for my kids. And one of my next questions after he said that he hadn't used protection was, how could you do that to me when I have fought for years just to be in this body for these kids? How could you risk my health like that? And he told me two things. He told me, first of all, I would come home from these engagements and I would take a shower with bacterial soap. And I would often use doTERRA On Guard and Melaleuca with my bar of soap in the shower to make sure that everything was rinsed off. Number two, my husband looked me dead in the eye and said, and you were so sick anyway, I felt like if I hurried that along, I would just be doing you a favor. And yes, after my husband said that, and after he sent me this amazing Valentine's card that I'm sorry I cheated on you, I lied and deceived, I have no empathy, you've endured pain and torment with me, blah, 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 blah. I had to stay with this crazy man because I was financially dependent on him as a Mormon stay-at-home mom, and I had absolutely nowhere to go, and I needed my health insurance. And I was stuck with a man who chose not to use any type of protection because he thought, I'll just end her life. The day after this conversation, I would make an emergency appointment to see my doctor same day, and this was one of the most degrading, terrifying moments of my entire 50 years of life. Sitting in that little hospital gown on this little, doctor's appointment table in his office in Ogden, Utah, crying my eyes out in shock. I had just found out that my Mormon returned missionary husband had this double life that I had absolutely no idea, that I was not mature enough or worldly enough to even wrap my head around. And choking out the words through my tears, Jake has been cheating on me with prostitutes. I think I may have an STD. Here's what my doctor said. He said, I knew it. And he said, and that's why, Jenny, I've always pressed you to do the STD panel in your annual physicals. But I always rejected it because it's like, I'm married. I don't need that. I'm in a committed long-term relationship. So why would we spend insurance money doing an STD panel? There was something about it that almost made me feel dirty to get screened for that. And my doctor was really heartbroken for me and really disgusted by Jake and told me that as a doctor in Utah, he had so many of his long-term committed female patients who found out through their annual lab work that their husband was cheating on them. So my doctor drew labs and found that I had 5 STDs. And I began a series of treatments with different medications and antibiotic injections in my butt. And I was lucky because they were treatable. They went away and I was past having babies, so they didn't damage my reproductive organs and make me unable to have children. But my husband would share with me that he had also engaged with 2 girls, again, without protection, one of whom he knew to have Hep C, which can be transmitted that way, and one that he had been told later was HIV positive. I cannot even tell you how seriously my doctors took both of those, making sure that they screened me carefully every 6 months, keeping their eyes peeled. I have been negative. It's been 7 years since the discovery of adultery, and I dodged a bullet. STDs are a health risk, which could potentially end your life. And when my husband chose, without me knowing and without me giving any consent, to have sex with multiples of other women for a prolonged amount of time, he was essentially pushing me off a cliff. And for that reason alone, I don't actually believe that anybody should ever stay with somebody who has cheated on them. For any reason, ever. Full stop, end of story, period. In addition to the health risk, my husband had destroyed our family finances. There was a period of time when I had 2 daughters, one in middle school, one in high school, who had such bad teeth. We just genetically don't have good teeth, that they wouldn't smile. They either smiled with their lips closed or they'd put their hands over their mouths for pictures. And I could not afford to put braces on my daughters and get any type of dental care. And my husband had all these stories about how our business was just failing and we just weren't making any money. And then I found out that our business was doing just fine. He was just spending all of the money on girls. He would tell me stories about sex workers that he would then take to the Park City outlet malls and take them shopping and buy them new Nikes and drop all kinds of money on them when I could not afford to buy my own children clothing or pay for dental care. My husband would also risk my life by bringing girls into our home. I had prostitutes who had pimps who were criminals. They were coming into my house when I was out of town, sleeping in my bed. A couple of the girls I talked to had looked me up on Facebook and they knew every detail of my life. They knew my children's names. They knew exactly where I lived. My husband was also transporting girls in his semi-truck, which was part of our family logistics business, which endangered our whole entire company that my cousin owned, as well as his job and our family income. He nails it in his Valentine's card when he says he would endure pain and torment with me. And he ends this with, "I love you forever, Jake." And that may be true. Jake may still be sitting around somewhere loving me. I certainly hope not. Back to the topic at hand. Are there times when, if you have a good relationship and you're fully aware of the risks of repeat cheating and all of that, are there times when you should stay in the relationship? Absolutely not. I do not believe that any woman should ever stay with a man who has risked their life, risked their health, and in every way betrayed all of the agreements that were foundational to the relationship to begin with. The sad truth is, you may not have been present and may not have even known it happened, but your marriage already ended the minute they dropped their drawers and began to exchange bodily fluids. And a man who does that to you does not deserve to be sleeping in your bed. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments on which version of my take on whether you should stay or leave resonates the most with you. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, share, and I would so appreciate that subscribe. Have a great day.